And so sit up straight and tall and start to feel more rather than less. We're just going to take some time to try to, like, I know as it comes through your body, some of our bodies hurt, you're in chronic pain, all that is true. And yet that comes after the fundamental connection, right? The fundamental connection is already being experienced, right? And then it maybe will come to different expressions through your body, who knows, right? But to allow, and even if it's just a placeholder, that typically, I think for me at least, it's more felt at the end of my exhalation, right? Where it's like, so that's why, like, and they already know this calms the parasympathetic or activates the parasympathetic nervous system, is that the exhale does a certain form of landing that is part of recognizing that's what's unchanging here precedes my mind. And that is not what I love about yoga for me, is that that doesn't have to be an act of faith. I can experience that. And then start to watch the ever present, as long as you're living, cascade of in and out with your breath. But it doesn't change what's underneath that. So you're softening the skin on your face. So your awareness, and around the temples and the jaw on the inside of the mouth. So your awareness is getting more supple, more receptive when you soften the organs of perception. So in this space, you just allow. So one of the things that I think asana does is introduces activated structure. So on these next few exhalations, start to notice how the shoulder blades drop slightly. And the chest, hopefully you practiced enough to know that on that exhalation, the spine also can elongate, which then indirectly slightly lifts the chest. So asana, you're trying to become a better conduit or receptacle for what's happening. What happens without your judgment. So now the activation starts, and that before you start, like pushing down through your sitting bones, know that allow for the quiet, the enveloping, empowering quiet. And try to start the activation of your sitting bones slightly, the alertness, to be seamless, not clunky. And as you slightly hit down with your sitting bones, elongating your lower abdomen, and then you start to lift your chest gracefully, which is why I like the instruction, migrate your upper thoracic forward. As that happens, I'm recognizing the opportunity for connection to my feet. And then draw a line. So the question is, when you started activating, did you tense the inside of your mouth? Did you press against the roof of your mouth? Release that, but keep the clarity in your spine. Now be grounded in your body and balance in the whole room. Your head over your neck, your all of the above. And then the place, at least in my consciousness, that balances with the whole room is different layer than where I breathe from. So then I got to merge them back together. staying patient to hear the happening. Knowing that this connection between you and the universe is profoundly intimate. The universe has space just for you. Activate some more to repose clarity, trying to make your actions congruent with what's light. But the light can't come without base. So now if you can, unbalance, which I'm not going to, bring your hands into prayer, activating and outward expression of the midline. I'm going to do it by feeling each sitting bone in the side of each of my breastbones. To find the space that goes right up from the sitting bones through the roof of my mouth, up. Feel the feet on the floor. Equalize the pressure with your hands in prayer. Strong in the midline. Congruent with everything else. Good. And then release. Take your sternum up towards your chin down over your sternum, knowing that a long line of yoga teachers going way back, since this position is particularly important. The lift of the chest, the drop of the chin, the activation of the rib cage, the feeling of your sitting bones, the feeling of the floor. Raise your head up with closed eyes. Open your eyes. So one of the things that I find so interesting about hands in prayer is that it does a couple of things. One, for me, when I make the connection, it's grounding right away. And it gives me an opportunity to let my mind spread. Like, because I got side to side awareness, it spreads. And that gives me the opportunity to equalize, right? So it's like, okay, so how do I keep each side equal coming up to the midline of my hands, right? And it doesn't matter if your hands are together, right? It's, or how they can be together or where they are, if they're up, if they're down. But you're practicing, I'm turning my hands purposely like unequal, right? Which makes it harder. But you can see it as the midline. So when I start to activate and press a little bit more, immediately I feel the rise more, but it's coming off of a grounded energy. So the connection here grounds. The openness goes in every direction. So I read one time that all of dog pose happens in the hands or is mirrored in the hands. Well, that wouldn't just be for dog pose. Your hands can be a touchstone for everything. So can every other part of your body, actually. So I'm practicing the midline and the opening by having a midline. My eyes are open because I'm not wanting to meditate here. I'm being an asana practitioner right now. And I'm listening. So I just caught that there's my index finger, my middle finger wasn't hitting towards each other as well. So I correct. but not too hard, because that busts everything. Good. And then release. Bringing your hands into service, or your body in service of the unchanging, is kind of what an asana practice is for, right? But so this focus in the beginning now start intersecting with more and more movement, right? So again, as you know, I like to warm up a little bit. So go back to front, like feel the changes of gravity, right? Because I'm wanting to feel freedom, not just focus, right? And then forward and back. So the focus can sometimes take the freedom, sometimes the joy out of the movement if you make it too inward. At least it does for me, right? Sometimes I'm relieved by the focus, but sometimes I'm constrained by the focus because I get too deep, right? And one of the things about the body is that it keeps you from getting too deep, right? It's always happening, right? And then up and down and over. So like even make this a sequence. You can do that your own thing, over to each side, up, forward, back, up, over, up, forward, back, right? Do whatever sequence you just developed a couple times, right? On your own, because the practice is your secret, right? It's your secret, right? So I'm just doing it, and I'm up again. Because I want to find where my body is on my chair, not just in my chair, right? And then I want to keep the sense that I'm on my chair, and then here, pause for a second and receive the chair's support. Exactly into the sense of more freedom, more awakening. Good. And then we're going to keep making it slightly more active. So some version of downward facing dog, right? So I'm going to do it this time with my hands on the table, right? And I'm wanting to particularly, whether your hands are on your knees or your forearms are on your knees, and maybe your hands are in prayer. I mean, there's all different ways. So like, you've seen me do something like this before. You can do it like this. If you're doing backwards that way, you can do it like this. You can do it like this. You can do all sorts of things, right? You can use a table, right? But what I want, again, is, the space I think is so important. I want you to elongate, hit down with your sitting bones and elongate, right? The spine while dropping the shoulder blades and extending out through the top of my head, right? And then I'm going to spread across the collarbones, both front and back. And I'm filling the vessel with my action. But it's not any one particular instruction. It's doing them all simultaneously. So you practice so you don't have to think it. You can just do it. Good. And then back. Now this time, I want there to be more focus on the connections between your hands and feet, right? Because that's a really big one in human being. If you notice, like hands and feet, and we evolved, there's more connections between your brain and your thumb and your brain and your big toe than almost any other place in your whole body, right? So we've evolved to be aware in hands and feet, right? So now ground your hands on a table or on your thighs, right? And so, especially when you're seated though, I think that you have to ground your hands, find your feet. But the only way I can better find my feet when I know where my sitting bones are. So I think your sitting bones have to be another pair of feet, right? At least it is for me. right? But I want to, once I get my sitting bones, I don't need to pay attention to them anymore. I just need to know I'm alert in the spine, right? And so now I really want to feel where my feet are. And so my brain and where my hands are, and have the 4 points merge together, which is part of what's happening in dog pose, right? But it's kind of hard, so you start mixing it up some. So press more down through your right hand and hit down through your left hip, and then release, and then change. Hit down through your left hand, right hip, and then change. Right hand, left hip, change. Left hand, right hip, and then go back to midline, go back to where it's balanced. So now we're going to add, see what's hard. If you just go, at least when I'm sitting in a chair, if I just go from hands to feet, I have a hard time not overexerting to find my feet in relationship to my hands because of the bend between the spine and the femur bones. So now I want you to feel your hands and feet. So now as you press down through the right hand and your left hip, hit down through the inside edge of the left heel. So you're making a connection and then release. So it's good. This is good, especially if you have like awareness different from each side of your body. So now take your, for me, it's the left hand, right hip, right foot. And then I'm going to switch back and forth. And as you do this, this is part of the secret of your own practice, right? Find your own rhythm between this from side to side. So do it a few times like it matters, but no one's going to be able to see exactly what you're doing, right? This is what I mean about the secret. So I'm actually just, in order to enhance the sensation of rhythm, I'm tipping a little bit from side to side, right? So as I go through the left hand, I kind of let myself rock and roll. And then I want the balance to include my whole body. So as I go harder on one side and then release and go to the other side, I'm going back and forth. Now I'm going to add my feet, even though I can't quite move my feet. Now I'm going to start rocking like I'm surrounded by the boat, and the boat's rocking, right? The boat's rocking back and forth. And my spine is moving a little bit side to side, right? And then it's like, well, wait, maybe in the movement, there might be the joy, right? What the heck? I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. But as I make it bigger, don't lose your feet, right? Make sure you're doing this rhythm with your whole body, back and forth. And you can start to like figure out that, boy, you could just kind of figure out anything to do from this position. So I'm just going to like sit back and then take the arm up over my head and let it stretch out. And then I'm going to come back because I'm watching the boat move, not just my body move, right? And so I'm going that way. And I'm just going to go back and forth. I really would like you to start creating your own sequences at home, right? During Kismayasana in particular, right? So I'm going back and forth, and then I'm going to go right back to my hands again. Here's my touchstone. So my hands and feet, I'm going to press down through one hand, do the opposite side, because we're trying to exercise different hemispheres of the brain, right? Back and forth. And this can even include your breath. So I don't want you to try to do this. I mean, I want you to do this, but not in the sequence we're just doing. Just notice the difference when you like block one of your nostrils, right? And feel that, and then do the other one. I don't want to teach alternate nose pranayama right now, but I want you to feel the difference. When something's less changing, notice what, like it's a touchstone of like when you have the nostril that's blocked, that becomes more like unchanging as the air goes in the other side, right? And then try it again. So you've got this, I think this is just like a huge revelation for me when I start to realize what it is to have something unchanging, and retention tends to hold things static. So you're forcing retention on one nostril, right? And then go on the other side. And then because you've blocked one side and then the other, now notice what it is to go through both nostrils And to me, it feels lighter again. So the retention actually revealed how to be more full, right? That's happening all the time in yoga poses too. All right, so now I've got this extra layer of like, wait, that's cool. There was more happening right in here than I thought, right? Go back to my hands and feet, whether it's on your lap or on a table. And now I'm gonna go press down and hit down to the opposite and start to do rhythm, right? Back and forth again. And let the breath gets complicated. It's interesting, right? So I'm wanting to make sure I'm going all the way down to my feet as I'm going back and forth. Good, and then ground in the center again. Left hand, right hip, right foot, right hand, left hip, right foot, left foot, pardon me. I'm gonna keep that, and then I'm gonna go over again. And I'm watching both the retentive part of my breath and the active part of my breath, right? And then come forward again, and then come back. So, right, one of the things that absolutely blew my mind in my practice was when I realized that although this makes like it seem, and working from side to side, makes it seem like the empty or the unchanging retentive part comes in and then out of phase and movements there and there. What really blew my mind is when I realized the retentive part, that quieter part, is actually never not happening, right? Even though I'm breathing. So breath introduces movement, right? But the underneath, there's a deeper depth that's always there that this only becomes a way for me to touch it. Working from side to side is just a way for me to touch it. It's not creating it. That changed my life, actually. Right? So that it's always with you. So now what's great is with asanas, now I want you to come forward, right? We're gonna like lean forward and try to do it equally, because in order to do it equal, like feel each foot sitting on the side of each chest, I have to activate with the retentive part of my awareness, the one that's more static, as I'm moving. And then I'm gonna back up and over, make it be slightly more of a celebration rather than a reckoning, right? For me, when I come forward in the forward bends, it's more of a reckoning, right? Like here it comes. I got nowhere to hide, right? It's just all right here. And then when I open and I back bend, it feels a little bit more like a celebration, right? And that's why I think sun citations makes people happy, right? And then forward, right? Now, as you come forward, doesn't it make sense that you'd be exhaling as you come forward? And then you're still staying steady with the unchanging. Then it makes sense. You start to inhale as you come up, right? And then you inhale and take your left arm. So you start like, and then exhale it back down. And so you start going, wait, all this thing can be with the movement, right? So now it gets tricky. So now when the right hand goes up, can I push through the left heel, right? The left sitting bone. And so now I'm actually having to practice the side to side while there's more movement, right? So as one arm goes up, the opposite side's going down, right? And I'm getting into a rhythm about it, right? And I don't want there to be a lot of strain. I want you to get the movement of it, and then start to include your whole freaking spine and make it be like your whole body's dancing. The arms coming up, but it's not just from your shoulder. You're reaching from down lower. You're hitting down lower so you can get higher, right? So you're going like, wait, this could be my whole body. Why have I been denying myself all of me? I don't know. Minds try to control too much. And so I'm going to sit there again now. And so because I feel more of a flutter, I'm all of a sudden going like, gosh, why wouldn't I twist with this energy, right? But I want it to be a happy twist. I'm going to come forward and open, right? So I'm just going to get this movement a few times, right? So I'm actually putting my forearm down on my lap and I'm turning, right? And then I'm watching. So as you turn, can you watch this rib come forward and the left side of your spine go back, right? The left side of your back. So you actually start to make that more whole. So you're not just turning. I could just turn. That's my mind controlling too much. Here's me feeling and saying there's a relationship between this part of my rib cage coming forward and this part of my rib cage coming back. And then when I get that balance, I'm going to hit down through my sitting bones and stretch out to the top of my head, right? And then go back and then try to do it the other way, right? So the other way is, again, like I have one side that works better than the other, but like, so I'm just going to get, I'm trying to watch the front, I'm going to say my right side of my rib cage coming forward, the left side of my rib cage coming back, then hitting down through the sitting bones and extending up to the top of my head. Good, and then release. So they're going to do it on the first side again. But as you do it, I want you now not just to pay attention to your rib cage, but pay attention to your sitting bones and feet. So I'm going to come forward again. I'm going to find a place of balance. So I'm going to grab part of my chair here, right? And I'm going to get, so I can launch me a little bit. But as I launch, I'm not just twisting. I'm bringing one side of my rib cage forward and one side of my rib cage back. And then once I get that reference, hitting down through the sitting bones and up through the chest. So there's going to be a whole bunch of standing poses right here, right? Remember, standing poses aren't so much about standing. It's about activating your spine, right? Through the limbs and then release, right? So the spine is supposed to get lit. So I'm going to go out and I'll go the other way. Find a place to grab my arm, get grounded, get one side of my rib cage going forward, the other side of my rib cage going back, lengthening my spine. And then hitting down through my sitting bones, down through my feet. And then come on back to center. And be in the center. Like for me, I can tell I just really hit something deep because I'm getting really thirsty, right? So I'm watching stuff like that. What happens to my autonomic nervous system, right? And so I'm going to sit and just ground for a second. I almost want to take a sip of water, but feel like that's not fair to you. Of course, I'm the one talking, for God's sakes, right? So I'm sitting up straight and tall. So from where do I balance? What type of awareness helps me balance my head over my neck? Where is it coming from? How does it show me the way? So I'm taking time to center. I'm being patient, even though I want action. Learning. Good, and then release. So I want you to come forward now. So right away, you start turning away from the sunlight a little bit. You look down, right? And so I want you to equalize. So I'm leaning each forearm on each leg, right? And I'm wanting to equalize that. I tend to lean forward more harder on my right thigh, right? So I'm trying to equalize. But the awareness is coming from what's behind and precedes, right? And then feel each foot if I can. And then I'm going to turn my center of my chest from the earth, so hitting out these symbols and feet, and slowly lift it skyward. Right? And and then my shoulder blades go down, they spread. I have a tendency to overdo my low back. So I'm really focusing on my legs and feet. And then release. On this, although on that one, I put my hands in my forearms on my thighs and just interlace my fingers. That was good. I'm going to do on this next one, and you can do either one. I'm going to do it with my hands in prayer. So I'm going to take, instead of, I'm pretty far away. instead of clenching like this, I'm going to do this, right, with my hands. As opposed to this, I'm going to do this. But you could interlock your hands too, right? It's not that different. What it does is add more skin awareness for me, right? When I'm in prayer here. So I'm coming forward and I'm letting there be the grounding, right? In the earth. I don't, for some reason, when I use my hands in prayer, I don't feel as falling towards the earth. Don't understand why, just in my perception, right? And so I'm going to ground down, going inward, but staying lifted because of a different position of my hands. And I'm going to bring my center of my chest from, like, for me, it helps to see like a dark spring, right, of water. And I'm going to bring it up towards like night water, right, up towards the suns by lifting my chest. And I'm going to keep the connection between each hand, between my palms, so I can feel each foot. So I'm using my hands to mirror where my feet are and even my sitting bones as I lift night water towards sun. Good, and then release. I'm going to uncoil and I'm going to go back and I'm going to descend, right, back towards the ground. Remember, we're practicing fundamental movements in relationship to your experience with the universe, right? So you're grounding, I'm going to have ground my hands, ground my feet, ground my sitting bones, go inward and get that all connected and equalized as much as I can. And then I'm going to start turning upward with the center of my chest, knowing that it goes from like, doesn't the water sun different at night, right? That feeling up, opening my eyes, staying symmetrical. And letting the night water start to open. Good, and then release. Right? So now, I want you to take your left arm up. Exhale, go around to the side. Take the arm behind you. Right? So now we're more twisting without, because we're not being so aware and forward, the twist is way different than it was. For me, I have a harder time getting down to the earth here because my spine wants to go towards the sun, which is what it's supposed to do, right? And then release, but I leave something behind, right? And then up and then down. So I'm trying to like, what part of me can stay with the part that I left behind as my actions move towards the blue sky. It's finally blue sky here, right? And it's supposed to be dull, cloudy all week, right? So I want to practice the center of my chest in relationship to the blue sky today, right? And so I'm like elongating up, but I'm trying to keep the down, keep the night water, right? And then come on back to center and be in the center, right? So this idea of rhythm again. So back and forth. I don't know about you, but being aware of what I'm calling water at night, I forget to be happy, right? And then off to the side, right? I get so focused. I start to believe in my constraints, right? Right, and then forward again. And then come back to the midline, and I want you to take your hands on your knees, right? Hit back towards the femur, towards the pelvis, and really figure out the relationship between that grounding and how to effortlessly lift your chest. And it's hard because you're gonna, as you hit back, your low back is gonna want to engage, or your mid back. So I'm trying to take that grounding, be disciplined enough not to let my lower back, the lower half of my back, but to keep the grounding helping me find the space between my shoulder blades. And then once I've got that, I want you to just lift this space. right? And be active. It's hard, right? And then release. It's easier to lift the rib cage than the sternum. And we often confuse ourselves between the rib cage and the sternum. They're very different. One's much more dynamic. One's much more free, right? And you got to figure it out. Okay, so again, I'm pushing back on my thighs. I'm grounding. Trying to find the center of my chest. And I'm using the structure of my feet, my hands, my sitting bones, each side of my chest to really find a focus in the center of my chest. And then instead of just lifting it upward, I'm going in all directions. And then release. So this movement in the spine that I'm talking about is it's much more dynamic than you know, right? Than I even know. So when I remember the first time I really got it, and I was with my yoga teacher, and she was having me sit in Baddha Konasana, soles of the feet together. I was on the floor, and she had me put a wood block between my shoulder blades, not too high, so like kind of between my shoulders, but on the downside. And she had me lean back into the wall and then learn how to hold the block between my shoulder blades, engage my shoulder blades, right? And then lift up and over the block. And success would happen when the block fell. Then she knew I wasn't cheating, right? So being able to separate the intensity of the inside edge of your shoulder blades from a lift of the sternum. So sit here for a second, and it would help that there was a block there at first. So, but I didn't have the story, right? So for me to do this, typically for me to really do it well, which is part of the dynamic force of back bend, I need to get some grounding here, right? Because once I'm here, I can drop my shoulder blades better. If I'm just in space here, shoulder blades seem like they're all alone. Try it. Like, don't have a good base and try to drop your shoulder blades, right? It's fine, but it's not quite including my whole body. So if I lean forward and ground or do this, right, then I can hit out against my legs and really drop my shoulder blades down, right? And then I'm going to spread them and start to lift. So I'm trying to tell you to grip that block between your shoulder blades, but then in the center, come forward and up. So as this inside part lifts, then lengthen your neck back, right? So you're grounded, you're getting the rib cage, the inner shoulder blades activated. Then you start to keep that structure, find the space in between, start to dynamically lift it, and take your chin back up, but don't shorten the back of your neck too much. Good, and then release. So practices like this, because I'm fused in my back, right? So from like T 4, 5, 6. So from like T1 to T6, I'm fused. So it's not smart for me to try to do radical back bends, right? And what Joe showed me was how to actually back bend at the thoracic, right? This is the hardest place to back bend, right? The other places go farther. And so coming forward again. So this little action, like, so when I'm teaching traditional students, there's a pose called the wheel pose. It's very dramatic. It's called Urvidanyurasana, right? And you're doing this full back bend like a crab, right? And very few people can lift here, right? It takes a lot of practice. So what we're doing is breaking this dynamic part of the back bend apart. So hit down through, lean forward, keep grounding, hit into your thighs and out a little bit so you can mirror that in your shoulder blades. Take a breath or two. Notice that both the retentive part of your awareness and the activating part of awareness are in play, right? And then try to lift that sternum, a lot of effort, not your rib cage, your sternum, up towards the sky. right? Night water hitting sunlight. Breathe. And then release. So this real active part gets lost easily when you're having the joy part of the back bend, right? So what I want on this next one is to use to stay grounded and connected with the night water at night, right? And so at first I'm sitting in neutral, pushing out my femur bones, getting the grounding, knowing the part of me that I need to lift, then switching gravity, releasing my hands. So let me just tell you what I know these things seem like really, really extra anal, but it matters. So when I'm saying I'm connecting, getting my own shirt, but getting the sternum to lift, then switching my hands, and then getting that sternum to lift. And then when I go back, I shift and I stay alert in the midline. And then I'm going up. And when I'm going up and over the back of my chair without pressing too hard against it, it's the sternum that needs to lift and elongate up and over. That's the inside of a back bend, right? No matter how big the back bend is, it's the harder part to do this, right? So we're going to give it a shot. So I'm starting with my hands in my thighs, getting my shoulder blades activated, dropping my shoulder blades, finding the space between, which would be my sternum. Let the space between be connected to my heels and feet and sitting bones, pardon me. Then I'm going to start to lift, right, the sternum. And then I'm going to shift my hands back, fall back on my sitting bones, but stay alert here and go up. And as I go back over the chair, I activate and do what we took so much time to do. And then go up with the sternum, lengthening the neck. Don't look back if you're getting dizzy. Good, and then release. So you've actually heard me give a less deep instruction that is weird by itself, right? Which is, in many times when I've taught you back bends in a chair, I've said, open the hood of your chest, right? Trying to get you to activate the rib cage and open, right? But if you think of this as a hood, when you do that, you end up having to go between your shoulder blades anyway, right? So it ends up being the same instruction. We just broke it apart. All right, so sit and remember, I'm telling you, this is the magic part of the back bend, right? But it creates heat. You might be getting kind of heated up a little bit, right? So it's like, yeah, this is real work. So again, I'm using my hands and my feet to find each edge of my shoulder blade. I'm opening that part of the shoulder blade. I'm staying connected to that unchanging part. I'm releasing through gravity, going to the back edge, trying to stay connected to the unchanging part, the night water, and then open up and over the back of my chair, opening the hood of my chest, but doing it from the center of my chest. Good, and then release and come back forward. So all this extra focus needs to be with you when you're more playful, right? So now you're just going to come forward again and back again and make it be more on your outer body because you're using rhythm, but keep the imprint of what we've been doing, part of the happier movement, right? The freeing movement. So now I want you to come forward and lift. And when you go up to up dog here, I want you to lead with the center of your chest and rolling the shoulders back, and then go, and then go back down and go, oh, right? One of the things about self-realization is more of yourself has to find the sunlight, right? And then go back over the back of your chair, right? And then come forward again and get this rhythm here of letting the center of the chest lift and release, lift and release, and then go back and open it, right? Oh, there it goes, right? And then release, and then come forward, lean on, right? So I don't know about you, but that much movement with that deep, I start to really feel it, right? And so I'm grounding my forearms on my thighs. I'm finding a spot of midline and I'm letting myself land. Because that spinal movement kind of makes me feel like I can fly, right? And that's a good sensation as long as it stays grounded. So apparently there was this art on a museum show that went around the United States. I didn't get to see it. My yoga teacher did. It was about the history of yoga. And I went to certain select cities. And this is kind of a funny little thing. But, and even I think this is meant to mention the sutras. Like in some of the older texts, they talk about yoga as being able to fly, right? And well, I don't know. Is it literal? I don't need to deny it. I don't need to think it, right? But it is interesting that what would be the sensation of flying? Would you have to be flying? Right? And then the other ironic and not surprisingly thing is that in some of the early drawings, there were women yogis. And then in different times of history, women got deified. And when a yogi became in a bad time of human failure, right? They become witches, right? That they would be seen by our culture as witches because they could connect more deeply to what's unseen, right? So it's like, it's a funny little thing. But again, what's flying, right? I don't think when I go back over to the back bend again, I don't think I'm necessarily flying here with the effort where my sternum comes in and whatever. But when after, and I feel the lightness pervade me, I kind of do feel like I'm hovering, right? And that ability to hover is going to protect your joints, but it's got to be grounded. All right, so take your left hand up, over to the side. Got to twist a little bit of those back bends out of the back, right? So gentle, but again, we're getting this like, remember the down, finding the up and turning it, right? And so now we're being gentle, right? Not so much focus, right? And then over, and you're just letting the outside of the pose help you not be stuck in a small room, right? And then release, because this center sternum part, to get there, you have to enter a small room and realize how it expands, right? And there's a reason why people don't learn to lift their sternum. It's because it's a small room, right? And then this way, and it's easier to move the big room, like your rib cage. But I can feel, like as I'm here at the end of my pose, and I'm almost in that retentive part where I'm not striving anymore. Can you pop open the center of your chest like champagne? Right there. Just get that little bit of opening that you practiced through effort and let it open more without force, and then release and come on back to center. So this is being activated without so much focus. And then down and over. I get it all there, and then I just let go for it to rise. Because it was always rising. It was always falling. Good, and then come on back to center. Be in the center. Come forward and elongate your back. So we're not back bending here. We're trying to make sure that parts of your body feel the freedom of more space. Right? So I can tell you which side of as I'm sitting here forward and using my hands and my feet as reference and my forearm and my thighs, I can tell you which side of my back worked harder than the other. Right? Pay attention. And where you can tell, and usually where my back hasn't worked as hard is more like the lights turned off. Right? It's kind of it's like a dark, empty spot. So as I'm sitting here centered and more equalized, I'm going to try to use my breath. Find the place that's more static. gently breathe in a way that elongates your spine and fills that places that you can't see as well. So if there's a part you feel like tweaked in your back, it's because you overworked that and you underworked the dark spot. You worked around it rather than through it, the dark spot. You didn't trust the night water, the cool water. Good, and then release. So practice symmetry now, because we're heading towards Shavasana. So especially if you're doing Shavasana chair, one of the disadvantages of your spine doesn't get as elongated, right? So that's why I often want to come forward and lengthen my low back for Shavasana in a chair. And then I'll also go gently this way and then forward and lengthen, because I want my spaces to get nourished. If my back were on the floor, I wouldn't have to do as much preparation, right? And then I'm going to come back and keep my spine long before I fall into Shavasana. Feet, hands, each side of the shoulders, each side of the head, open to what's behind your head, on the side of your head. And then prepare for Shavasana. So find the change in gravity in which you feel the most supported. How you're leaning against your chair. I hope when you were preparing, you weren't leaning against the back of your chair. If you were, next time, practice symmetry without the chair holding you up. So now soften the skin on the face, the temples. This is all the skin on your forehead. It's all to get the energy around your eyes to let go. Connect that back to the base of your tongue, to include the inner ear. Lips together, teeth slightly apart. Use the sensitivity of your hands or sensitivity in the feet. Feel your breath. Don't change it. Thank your body. It's definitely more connected than your mind. Start to bring yourself back. Slightly deeper inhalation, slightly longer exhalation. When you're ready, open your eyes slowly. Close them again. You need to, and open again. Sometimes I try to sink the deep part of my chest effortlessly to widening my eyes, right? So my eyes widen from a more grounded space. All right, everybody.